Welcome to the Legal Leaders Podcast with Ollie Rock. Kim Fine and Neil Handwerker are the co-founders of Ex Judicata, an employment platform built specifically to help attorneys find non-legal positions. Kim and Neil bring decades of experience in business development, recruiting, and the legal industry, which they capitalized on to identify the gap in the market for JDs to leverage their degrees. This is their second time working together as they sold their first company in the early 2000s. Since they've launched, they've had around 100,000 unique users visit their website and have helped countless attorneys pivot to non-legal roles. This is also the first sponsored episode of the Legal Leaders Podcast, and I'm thrilled to share this conversation with our audience. We hope you enjoy the episode. Awesome. Welcome to the podcast.
Thanks so much for having us.
Thank you for having us.
It's great to have you both on, and congratulations on all the success with Ex Judicata. Before we get into this venture, I do want to start out by asking, this is your second venture together. Is that correct?
Yes. Our first venture was a company called Fordham Information Services that we grew over the period 1995 to 2000 and sold to a public company in 2000. This was a B2B conference company. The core audience was primarily lawyers, but we also did programs for C-level executives too. And we just kind of built it at a time when the internet, really the dawn of the internet age.
Love it.
Sure. So I had worked for Neil, my second job out of college. So I've known Neil since age 23. And we were working together. We had the opportunity to, with angel backing, build our own executive education enterprise, which we did. And we've always been in and around legal. Neil is a JD. I am not, but I've been in the legal industry for forever. But legal touches everything, right? So while we did a number of events that were for law firm management, lawyers, regulatory, in-house counsel, we also branched out into accounting, public relations, the medical industry, really any industry that needed to have continuing education credit, but they were all touched by legal, right? Because you'd always have either a due diligence topic or a regulatory topic. So we built Fulcrum up to, almost 300 events a year, a trade show, customized events, private label events, in-house training events, and much more, as well as Neil had mentioned, directories and books. So
there was one other thing, Kim. You know what? We were also among the first to try e-learning. This is really the dawn of e-learning. Nobody really was, there was nothing like today. It was basically CD-ROM based programming, which we started creating.
Yeah, and this was right in the dot-com era, right? So company started in 1996 and exited in 2001. So, did that have sort of an impact on the success of the company?
Yeah, absolutely. And we were down on Fifth Avenue in the 20s, and that's what they called it, Silicon Alley versus Silicon Valley. So we were down there with a lot of the individuals that really shaped the dot-com industry. So that was very exciting. And yes, it did, because we were right there. So we're in the middle of all the technological developments, and Neil and I would look at that and say, okay, how do you take that and overlay that to the much more traditional business of in-person conferences?
I love it. Yeah, so let's talk a little bit about your backgrounds, and then we can talk about your latest venture, Ex Judicata. So Neil, I know you have a JD, and Kim, you have an MBA. And so I'll start with you, Neil. I know you graduated from Fordham Law in 1984. So I looked at a little bit of your history. I didn't see that you worked as an attorney, or maybe you did, but not for too long. So I want to know sort of, how did this whole entrepreneurship journey start for you?
Well, I was one of those people who went to law school because they didn't know what else to do as a history major. But once I was there, I liked the learning. I liked what the direction of the curriculum, analytical thinking, how to speak on your feet, how to present persuasively, all of the things that basically lawyers learn to do in school. And I thought that I could take that and apply it in many different ways, in many different industries. But what I found was nobody cared. Nobody cared that I had a law degree. I went looking for resources that could help me. Basically, all I was saying is, I've got a JD. I think it's valuable, but I could not find any. Back then, it was the want ads in papers. There were no search firms. The dawn of the internet. So there was really nothing available. So I just went out and found these jobs myself. And simply because I had this background and felt that you could do anything with the background. So that got me these interviews and these first jobs, just simply presenting myself as, well, of course I can do this job. And it just kind of went from there. And that's kind of overlays kind of everything we do. If you've got a JD, of course you could do this.
Love it. And so you sort of knew from the start that you weren't going to practice.
Yes. So I worked at a firm that doesn't exist anymore for about 3 months. And
Got
uh,
it.
and that was an interesting 3 months. Digress just for a second because it was kind of fun because I knew I didn't want to be there, and a couple of other people knew they didn't want to be there. We would do whatever we wanted, things that first years don't do. We left at 5 o'clock on the dot. We didn't leave a jacket. In those days, you had to wear a shirt and tie. We didn't leave our jacket on a chair to pretend we were there. We just left. We'd go out to lunch. And the best was back then, strict dress code, shirt and tie in the hall. We were just wearing turtlenecks and stuff. And the funny thing is, Ali, not a single person ever came up to me and said, "You can't do that." No, but so I basically I resigned. I was expected to be fired, but I wasn't.
Incredible. And yeah, and you went on to start some businesses. And then I'll go over to you, Kim. Obviously, you have, you got an MBA, you have sort of started with that business background. What did the early part of your career look like?
Actually, I started in M&A research, and after about 2 years or so, I recognized that the path to becoming an investment banker was not a fit for me for a number of reasons. And I literally answered an ad in the New York Times for a conference programmer, and that's when I went to work for Neil. So I've
Wow.
been doing,
That's
the sort of executive education, connecting people, developing content for more than half my life, and I love it.
That's fantastic. And so, okay, let's fast forward to after you exited the business together to Sylvan. Where did your paths take you? So, Neil, I'll go back to you. What happened after that point?
sure. I thought, where could I use all the contacts that I had made over the years with lawyers? And I thought, maybe legal search. I didn't know anything about the legal search business except, you call people and try to get them to move jobs. And that's what I did. And I went to work for a company called Lucas Group. I was fortunate enough to do fairly well the first couple of years, and I became the managing partner of the New York office. And then another couple of years later, I was the general manager of the legal division. Um, all this time, in addition to managing, just continuing to place people myself as a headhunter. And
Yeah.
I was doing that until 2022, when I thought there's got to be something else for me. I didn't feel that I was moving the needle at all. I felt that I was kind of shuffling the deck. I take partner A and move them to this firm. I take partner B and move them to that firm. And there are a lot of people doing that. I mean, it's a good way to make a living. Don't get me wrong, but it no impact. So I started to
Interesting.
think. I thought back to my experience as an associate, what I found when I left. Oh, and there was one other element, Ali, and that was during the last couple of years in the search business, I kept having people tell me, you know what, I'm not interested in moving to a law firm, and I'm not interested in moving to a law department. But if you have a business job, I would be really interested. And that kept happening. So that also was in the back of my mind. So to make a long story short, I did some research and thought and found rather not that much had changed since 1989, or
Yeah.
whatever the year was. And I thought, maybe there's something that I can do here. Maybe there's a company that we could put together. And when I say we, I had Kim in the back of my mind. Kim and I last worked together in the year 2000. So when I called Kim out of the blue in 2022 with an idea, we hadn't spoken in a few years. Friends, but people's lives take them in different directions. So when I called Kim, I knew that if Kim didn't think this was a good idea and was able to join me, I would not do it because I knew that
Yeah.
I could not do it without her. And fortunately, well, Kim will tell
Yeah,
her
no,
story.
that's incredible. I mean, you have so much experience with headhunting. I mean, you did that for, I would say around 20 years or
Yeah.
so.
Yeah.
And so it seems natural that you would have the idea when you're constantly talking to lawyers and partners and that sort of thing and getting an understanding of the lifestyle. So that seems like the natural sort of idea progression. And Kim, I'll go back to you. What were you up to after you exited the company?
Sure. So I stayed in executive education. I took the team from Fulcrum and we joined another entity. And once everyone was settled there, I actually then joined American Lawyer and ran reporting up to, different individuals, ran their executive education division. So it's now called Legal Week. It's coming up in March. But when it was Legal Tech, I was the programmer for that, as well as all of their conferences. So that was an incredible experience working with the editors and the publishers and what have you. And then I did other related areas to corporate governance, board of directors, general counsel, law firms. It always sort of came back to that wheel, if you will. Prior to Neil reaching out to me, I had worked with a gentleman named Patrick Krill, who is the foremost expert in substance use disorder, suicide ideation, anxiety, and depression in the legal industry. And as most of your listeners probably know, the legal industry is the seventh highest industry with these afflictions. And Patrick and I did the first public conference around this. So when Neil came to me with this concept, not only was I thrilled to have the opportunity to work with Neil again in doing the research, I knew from firsthand experience that there are a lot of pain points. So it doesn't mean that there are not brilliant people who shouldn't use their skill set. It just means they might need to use their skill set in a different setting. And then we did, additional research, all of which you probably know. 24% of your 3Ls in a national average do not practice law. They look for alternative positions. 65% of your associates across the country are not elevated to partner. So, in the past, where do you go? You can become an of counsel, you go to another law firm, things of that nature. But what we're now doing is with all these, different individuals, we're giving them an opportunity to take their experience and their education and apply it to myriad positions that align with the JD skill set. So that's what we're all about.
Amazing. And yeah, since we're on the topic and now we've gotten to the new venture, yeah, Kim, if you want to just re-explain, like, what exactly is Ex Judicata?
Ex Judicata is an all-inclusive platform for lawyers that are considering or committed to moving from law to a non-legal business role. We have a
Incredible.
diagnostic that we built with a team of PhDs in organizational behavior and analytics, which will give you an output, 5 careers, and the probability of success in those careers. We have a panel of coaches that will help you with your LinkedIn, your resume, strategy, things of that nature. We then, of course, have the job board, which has over 1,000 jobs that are JD Advantage, Preferred, Adjacent. They are annotated as such because what we've learned from the law schools is that if it is a JD Preferred, Alternative, Adjacent position, it will count towards their placement metrics with American Bar Association. And then we have a tremendous amount of content, interviews with lawyers that have pivoted, that tell their story. And then, of course, we have courses and webinars, a whole series on If I Leave the Law, with lawyers speaking about their transition and how their JD helped them. So we're
Yeah.
really a full service platform to help people that are considering making this transition.
I love it. Yeah, and it just seems like there's such a place in the market for this, and just to help me visualize in the audience, like, let's say I'm someone with a JD, I'm 5 or 10 years out. Maybe Neil, can you give me an idea of what does this actually look like? Like, what does that dissatisfaction look like? Or maybe they are satisfied that motivates them to look elsewhere.
I think there's a couple of things. One was the sheer number of people that had hit the wall, primarily big law people that didn't know what else they could do, were panicked, and really felt that they had no guidance, no one even to listen to them, no one even to talk to. So there were those people, and then there were the people that maybe even in law school realized that they could use their JD skill set. So when they went and practiced law, they had in the back of their mind that they were going to transition out at some point. They didn't know when, and so for a lot of these people, when came, and we're trying to help them now, match up existing opportunities and find new ones for them.
Got it. And question for both of you. I mean, how are you sourcing these jobs, and how do you narrow down, what kind of jobs that folks with JDs would be more qualified for?
Sure. Well, we've studied the marketplace, and when we were building, we would look at various types of positions and how that skill set aligned with the skill set in different practice areas. This was a lot of research that went into building the diagnostic. So there are more traditional positions that you might think of, like compliance, privacy, investigative services, risk. But then there are emerging areas like AI governance, which is perfect for somebody who has that cyber or that privacy background, who wants to make that move. Legal operations. We're big fans of Connie's and running legal like a business. That's a great place to transition to. Legal technology. So many developments happening right now, whether a JD who's looking for a pivot might want to be in product development or sales or what have you. So many, many different opportunities. And then I'll let Neil jump in, because Neil's goal is to then take it further to even jobs you couldn't imagine hiring a lawyer for,
Yeah,
getting the
exactly.
employers to think about that.
Exactly. One of the people that we interviewed, we have about 40 interviews on our website. One of the people that we interviewed was a lawyer, 2 years in big law. He went to Procter and Gamble in the law department, and 2 weeks in, he said, "Hey, I don't want to be in the law department. What else can I do here?" And nobody said anything. So he said, "Well, how about brand management? How about Tide?" Um, and he wound up convincing the people at Procter and Gamble to put him on the Tide account. And he was one of the people behind, I think, that the Tide pen that used to kind of apply to spots. And he was a superstar. So I want to get positions like that, advertising, marketing, sales,
Yeah.
pretty much
It's
anything.
so good. And can you speak to, I mean, especially Kim, I want to know, like, what are your thoughts on the value of an MBA versus a JD? What areas do they overlap, and in what areas might a JD have an advantage for these types of roles?
Oh, JD has a definite advantage across the board, right? And saying that, I mean, I loved my MBA program, and I went on to do other graduate certificates and whatnot. The JD is a professional degree, right? Which is very different than an MBA. So it brings that sort of extra like seal of approval with it. But just, I mean, the reading, the writing, the negotiating, the issue spotting, the risk management. I mean, I think the place where you're really going to diverge if somebody's hardcore finance or accounting, right? That is a whole different world, right? Or engineering, But if you're in sort of that business world, I think a JD is a phenomenally strong background for almost anything they might want to do.
Gotcha. And can you speak to maybe a success story of someone you worked with?
Well, this is an interesting one, because a company came to us wanting to hire a lawyer in a non-legal job, Ali, but not. They didn't want to use the job board because they thought the position was a little more advanced than for a junior lawyer. This particular company, Marsh McLennan, we can say, was looking to add a partner, a bankruptcy partner, who would leave their practice and come work for them in their global turnarounds group in a newly created non-legal job. Kim found a person who was about to retire from Paul Weiss, senior partner, um, Alan Kornberg, and we moved him over to Marsh, and he was thrilled. He said, "You know what? I never in a million years would have gotten this type of opportunity if you didn't come to me. It's a second act." And that also got Kim and me thinking about, well, we're really not just for the young attorneys; we're for everybody.
Totally. And let's double click on that in terms of like, mental health and overall satisfaction. What kinds of changes are you seeing?
Absolutely. So, what's really interesting is if we charted out the year of graduation, it's usually between 2016 and 2018. And also, what's I just love is I've worked with a number of young men between, say, like 33 and 36 that might have, two or three little kids at home, and they want to be present. They want to have a different quality of life. All the studies, and again, this is no secret and no surprise, but the studies by, take your pick, the ABA, now, but anyone else who does the studies, it's the billable hour, right? That's what really drives a lot of the anxiety and some of these other issues. Now, other types of industries have billable hours, so I would not suggest that they jump into one of those industries. But you're going to business or entrepreneurship or other types of positions. Yes, you may still be working like a maniac, but it's a very different kind of pressure than that billable hour. So that's one of the drivers of some of the dissatisfaction. And listen, if somebody is on that rocket ship and they're a great fit at Big Law and they're going wonderful. Like, we are not here to recruit people out of law. I'll say that again. We are not here to recruit people out of law. We are here to help the hundreds of thousands of people that leave the practice and are trying to figure out what to do next. So we're working with the law firms. We're working with the law schools to help them, because think about it. If the law firm is supportive of an individual and they go to a business and then they go to their alumni group, they are now in a situation to drive revenue to the law firm, which is fantastic. So yeah, we're partnering with everyone.
Yeah, Neil, do you have anything to add to that?
No, it was a surprise to me that the law firms would embrace us. They also gave another example of associates who they felt were terrific employees, but they knew weren't going to make it, and kind of like indicated to them, maybe you should do something else. And if the person wanted to do something besides practicing law, it would take a long time. And the partner said, in a nice way, said, this, it really eats up. We keep paying a person who we know it does not want to stay here, but we don't want to just cut that person loose. So
Yeah,
we can come in and hopefully help that person early on, and then it helps the law firm because they don't have that salary for that many more months.
yeah, and sometimes it's not even folks' fault. I noticed on your website you were helping 3Ls who are impacted by the hiring
Yes,
freeze. Yeah, Kim,
yes,
go ahead.
yes. We're so excited. Thank you for mentioning it. I was going to mention it as well. We're working with a lot of the law schools. Of the 197 ABA law schools, about 60 have onboarded us. So when we're reading about what was happening to these 3Ls, we just said, okay, time to put our money where our mouth is. So for any 3L who was impacted by the federal government hiring freeze and had their job rescinded, we're giving them run of the site complimentary, and talking to them and helping them network and doing whatever we can, for them.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, for sure. I mean, there's a place for folks that might be dissatisfied or people that, might be in a situation where it's no fault of their own. So, absolutely love that. I do want to talk about compensation. That might be something that's on a lot of folks' minds, and they might think, if I pivot, what's that going to look like? I will say from my personal experience in working in tech sales, there were a lot of folks that I worked with that had JDs. And, if they were good salespeople or they worked in partnerships, they were clearing, in some cases, sometimes more than what they might be making as lawyers. So I'll put it to you folks to ask, what are you guys seeing in the market in terms of compensation?
I'll give you a couple case examples. It depends what they want to pivot to, right? If someone comes to me and they say, I'd like to go work for a not-for-profit, well, you're going to be taking a serious pay cut, and it might not ramp back up. But in the words of a member of our advisory board, Andrew Gold, who's the former Chief Human Resource Officer of Pitney Bowes, he went in to have a corporate salary, but then he also got options, right? Very different compensation structure from law firms. So you might take an initial cut if you're going into one of these types of business roles, but then as your career grows, based on not only your comp and your bonus, but if you're in a situation where you're going to have options or something, you may end up making more than you might have made. Again, back to my point, if you're like a rocket ship partner at Big Law in M&A, then stay there.
And if you are in big law and you have any inkling that you may want to do something else, you really should start to think at that point, financial planning. Talk to a family member perhaps that can help. If not, maybe you have a broker, maybe you currently have a financial planner. Any expert that can lend some guidance, because it is difficult. You're right, Ali. Especially if you're coming from a large firm, you have to kind of
Yeah.
prepare for it.
Yeah, and I would just add to your point, Kim, too. Like, a big reason folks go in house is also for the stock options. If they go to a Meta or a Google, that can become really
Yes,
valuable. So
absolutely.
it does go both ways.
Yeah.
And I do want to ask,
Absolutely.
sort of like, what's the strategy for sourcing these jobs? Obviously, you're both super well connected, being in headhunting and doing all sorts of other people facing roles. But yeah, what is the strategy behind that?
It's a really a multi-pronged approach. Direct market access, people that we know through contacts that will give us their jobs, will post their jobs with us. And then it's a tremendous amount of research in what we think could be an appropriate fit. And then it's continuous outreach. I just did a whole project on Sales Navigator trying to get the intersection of talent acquisition executives who also have their law degree. So there were only a few hundred, but those few hundred will be hearing from me this weekend, probably.
Yeah, Neil,
That's
I also saw in your profile that you have a team that works to outsource jobs. Is that also correct?
Yeah, we have two people who are terrific in India that scan the corporate websites primarily. We've given them really strict guidelines as to what a job that a JD might be able to take would be, and they have learned a lot as we've gone on. So now they are much more comfortable going to all of these corporate job boards throughout the country and sourcing jobs. And we're accumulating those jobs.
Amazing. And Kim touched on this earlier. And I want to ask you, Neil, what other services other than the core job board do you provide with Ex Judicata?
Well, one important thing is counseling, because Kim and I, at least while we can, are always available. We spend a lot of time talking to people, talking to associates that are trying to figure out what they want to do, talking to partners that are trying to figure out what they want to do, talking to law students. So there's kind of, I guess there's the benefit of being able to reach the founders. We're fairly easy to get. Kim went through the other things that we have. We also have a couple of core programs, courses. One is on financial fluency, since so many lawyers who leave the practice don't have any idea of what is a balance sheet, what's a P&L statement. I didn't, and one of the best pieces of advice that I got when I left law was take a course, take a basic course, and I did. And we created this program with a wonderful gentleman who is a professor, or a retired professor now at Notre Dame, who literally wrote the book, Ali, Accounting for Lawyers, that's used in 3/4 of American law schools. So this
Wow.
is just a basic fundamental course.
Love it. And Kim, I want to ask, for folks that are trying to make this transition, I saw you had some sort of blogs on your website about how to actually frame that and how to leverage the JD to make that pitch. So, what sort of advice do you give to folks to leverage their JD to pitch themselves?
Well, it really depends on the individual person when I'm speaking to them. Like, and I try to figure out what their superpower is and how they can get that to shine through when they're recrafting their resume. And, then there's the trick of the applicant tracking systems. And then there's the circle of, do I use AI to create my resume because AI is going to be reviewing my resume, right? So we always try to say, listen, if you know a person there at the company that you're applying to, if we know a person there, if there's any way you can get like that human connectivity, that will make all the difference in the world. But it's not one size fits all. It really isn't. It's really what each individual is interested in, where their passions lie, and what might be a nice fit for them, and then helping them get to that next step in, who they might be talking with or interviewing with or applying jobs they're applying to.
Amazing. Cool. I want to ask about the general company growth. I know you just are under 100,000 unique users, which is incredible. So, sort of, how is the growth of the company going, and what's on the horizon?
We have about 1,200 jobs on the job board. We'd like to have 12,000. We'd like to have so many more jobs that aren't sourced from India, but jobs that we get directly from the corporations. And that's Kim and myself going out and talking to CHROs, acquisition heads, about why they should hire the JD, not just for law adjacent jobs like compliance, but for everything, marketing, sales, business development, whatever it may be. So if we were going to focus on an area where resources would be tremendously helpful, it would just be having sales function so that we can contact more and more talent acquisition heads around the country.
Incredible. And it's a subscription model, correct?
Well, that's a great question, because right now it's actually not a subscription model. The job board is a subscription model, but we are evaluating if that is a model that we should pivot to. Because as a startup, a lot of the content, most of the content, we've been gifting. So, but it's valuable, right? So, we need to shore that up a little bit, and we're learning as we go, right? It's the nature of building something from scratch.
Awesome. Well, congratulations on all the growth of Ex Judicata. This is amazing. This is also the first sponsored episode of the Legal Leaders podcast, which is super exciting. Any last words before we end? Kim, I'll start with you.
I just wanted to say thank you very much for your time, and for any lawyers listening to this that are even considering of a career transformation pivot, reach out to us. We're here to help.
I would echo that. We are available by email. We're not hard to find, and we learn a lot also when we talk to the market.
Yeah, and how can folks reach you?
Exjudicata.com.
Yep.
And Kim?
Similarly, Kfine, Fine, at exjudicata.com.
Kim
Incredible.
gets most of the questions because her name is easy to figure out in an email.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you.